Hi everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Anna. Today I have a new story for you, called Beneath the Surface. It's about a woman who never particularly trusted deep water, and decides to face that discomfort head-on by learning something most people find genuinely intimidating. As always, just relax and listen, and let's begin. Laura Bennett was 36 years old, working as a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm, living a comfortable, predictable life in a city considerably far from any ocean. Laura had never particularly enjoyed water activities, avoiding deep swimming pools since childhood and generally preferring vacations involving mountains or cities rather than beaches or tropical destinations. Her discomfort with deep water traced back to a specific childhood memory, swimming lessons at age 7, where an overly enthusiastic instructor had pushed her toward the deep end before she felt genuinely ready, resulting in a frightening moment of panic that Laura still vaguely remembered decades later. Though she had eventually learned to swim competently enough for basic recreational purposes, something about genuinely deep, dark water had always triggered a subtle, persistent unease she rarely discussed with anyone. Everything shifted when her closest friend, Michelle, invited her on a group vacation to a small island destination famous for its incredible coral reefs, specifically organized around scuba diving. Laura initially hesitated considerably, uncomfortable with the entire premise of breathing underwater using equipment she didn't fully understand, surrounded by open ocean she found genuinely intimidating. "You don't have to dive," Michelle reassured her during their planning conversation. "There's snorkeling too, and plenty of beach time. But honestly, Laura, I think you'd genuinely love diving if you gave it an actual chance." "I don't know," Laura said uncertainly. "Breathing underwater just sounds fundamentally wrong to me, somehow." Michelle laughed. "That's exactly what I thought before my first dive too," she said. "Then I actually tried it, and everything changed completely. I really think you'd feel the same way, if you gave yourself the chance." Laura considered this for several weeks, her curiosity gradually overcoming her instinctive hesitation. Eventually, she decided that rather than simply watching everyone else dive while she remained safely on the boat, she would attempt getting properly certified beforehand, giving herself several months to prepare rather than attempting something so unfamiliar for the first time during the actual trip itself. She researched local dive certification courses, discovering a dive shop near the city's largest indoor pool complex, offering complete beginner certification courses combining classroom instruction, confined water training in the pool, and eventually, open water certification dives at a nearby lake before the actual trip. Laura's first classroom session felt considerably more technical than she anticipated, covering diving physics, equipment functionality, safety procedures, and the physiological effects of underwater pressure on the human body. Her instructor, an experienced, calm man named Diego, who had been diving professionally for over 15 years, patiently explained complex concepts using clear, accessible language. The classroom itself was a small room attached to the dive shop, decorated with faded posters of tropical reefs and framed photographs from Diego's own decades of diving adventures around the world. Laura sat alongside 5 other beginners, all sharing the same mixture of curiosity and mild apprehension, taking careful notes as Diego explained concepts like decompression sickness, proper ascent rates, and the importance of never holding one's breath while diving, a counterintuitive rule that surprised several students in the room. "Diving isn't inherently dangerous," Diego told the small group of nervous beginners during that first session. "It becomes dangerous when people ignore proper training and safety procedures. Our entire course exists specifically to make sure you never find yourself in that position." Despite Diego's reassurance, Laura felt genuine anxiety building as the classroom sessions progressed toward actual pool training. The idea of breathing entirely through equipment, submerged completely underwater, triggered something primal and uncomfortable within her, a discomfort she hadn't fully anticipated when initially signing up for the course. Her first confined water session, held in the shallow end of the training pool, proved considerably more challenging emotionally than Laura expected. Standing waist-deep in the pool, wearing the full weight of an unfamiliar tank and equipment for the first time, Laura already felt somewhat overwhelmed before even attempting to breathe underwater. Diego walked the small group through the equipment carefully, demonstrating how to properly place the regulator, clear water from the mask, and communicate through simple hand signals. Simply placing the regulator in her mouth and breathing underwater for the first time, even in water barely 5 feet deep, triggered an intense wave of claustrophobic panic, her instinctive response fighting desperately against the unfamiliar sensation of breathing compressed air rather than natural atmosphere. Her chest tightened, her mind screaming that something was fundamentally wrong despite her rational understanding that the equipment functioned exactly as intended. Laura surfaced quickly, gasping, removing her mask entirely, her heart pounding uncomfortably fast, several classmates glancing over with concern. "I don't think I can do this," she admitted to Diego, genuine fear evident in her voice, her hands still trembling slightly as she treaded water near the pool's edge. Diego remained calm and encouraging. "This reaction is extremely common," he said. "Your body is fighting against millions of years of evolution telling you humans shouldn't breathe underwater. We'll go slowly, one small step at a time. There's absolutely no rush." Over the following sessions, Diego worked patiently with Laura specifically, breaking down each skill into smaller, more manageable components. Rather than immediately submerging fully, they practiced simply kneeling in shallow water with just her face partially submerged, gradually building her tolerance before attempting full submersion again. "You're allowed to feel uncomfortable," Diego reminded her during their third session together. "The goal isn't eliminating discomfort completely. It's learning to function calmly despite it." By her fourth session, Laura successfully completed a full 10 minutes of continuous underwater breathing in the shallow end, a milestone that felt disproportionately significant given how straightforward it likely appeared to her more naturally comfortable classmates. Her classmates included a retired teacher named Susan, pursuing diving as a new retirement hobby, and a young marine biology student named Jason, who already felt completely comfortable underwater and often offered Laura quiet encouragement between exercises. There was also a middle-aged couple, Tom and Rachel, celebrating their upcoming anniversary trip by learning to dive together, and a nervous college student named Priya who, Laura noticed with some relief, seemed to share at least some of her own underlying anxiety about the whole process. "You're doing genuinely well," Jason told her after that fourth session. "I remember watching my own sister struggle with almost identical anxiety when she started diving years ago. She's now a certified dive instructor herself." "Really?" Laura asked, genuinely surprised. "From that kind of fear to actually teaching other people?" "Completely," Jason said. "She still tells the story of nearly quitting during her first pool session, exactly like you almost did. Now she can't imagine her life without diving in it somehow." This comparison offered Laura genuine hope, understanding that her current discomfort didn't necessarily predict her eventual capability, provided she continued patiently working through the specific challenges triggering her anxiety. She found herself thinking about Jason's sister frequently during the following difficult sessions, using that story as quiet motivation whenever her anxiety threatened to overwhelm her again. Over the following weeks, Laura's confidence in the pool gradually developed, mastering essential skills, clearing water from her mask underwater without panicking, sharing air with a diving partner during simulated emergencies, and properly controlling her buoyancy using specialized equipment designed to help divers remain neutrally suspended within the water column. The emergency air-sharing skill proved particularly nerve-wracking initially, requiring Laura to intentionally remove her regulator underwater and calmly signal to her diving partner before receiving their backup regulator instead. The deliberate act of removing her only air source, even knowing help was immediately available, triggered a fresh wave of instinctive panic during her first attempt, her hands fumbling clumsily as she reached for Diego's offered backup regulator. "Slow down," Diego signaled calmly, using simple hand gestures to communicate patience even underwater. They practiced the exercise repeatedly over several sessions until Laura's movements became smooth and confident, no longer requiring conscious thought to execute correctly under pressure. The buoyancy control skill proved particularly frustrating initially. Laura repeatedly found herself either sinking uncomfortably toward the pool floor or rising unexpectedly toward the surface, struggling to achieve the precise equilibrium more experienced divers seemed to manage effortlessly. Every small breath she took seemed to send her drifting in one direction or another, an exhausting cycle of overcorrection that left her feeling perpetually out of control. "I feel like a broken elevator," Laura complained good-naturedly during one particularly frustrating session, having just unexpectedly floated toward the surface for the third consecutive attempt, her equipment clanking awkwardly against the pool's edge as she bobbed upward yet again. Diego laughed kindly. "Everyone struggles with buoyancy initially," he reassured her. "It requires developing an entirely new physical intuition most people have never needed before. It'll click eventually, usually when you're least expecting it." Susan, nearby, offered her own sympathetic observation. "I spent an entire session doing exactly what you're describing," she admitted. "Bouncing up and down like some kind of confused cork. Then suddenly, during my next session, I just understood it somehow. I genuinely can't explain what changed." True to Diego's prediction, during her sixth pool session, something finally shifted, and Laura found herself hovering comfortably several feet above the pool floor, making small, controlled adjustments to her breathing that kept her precisely balanced without any conscious effort. The sensation felt genuinely magical, weightless in a way she had never previously experienced. "There it is," Diego said, watching her from nearby, genuine satisfaction evident in his voice. "Now you understand why people become genuinely passionate about this." With her pool sessions successfully completed, Laura's course progressed toward open water training, scheduled at a nearby freshwater lake known for relatively clear, calm conditions suitable for certification dives. This transition brought renewed anxiety, since the lake environment introduced numerous variables absent from the controlled, predictable swimming pool: reduced visibility, colder water temperatures, and considerably deeper depths than anything she had previously experienced. Her first open water dive, descending to a modest depth of approximately 20 feet, tested her composure considerably. The murky lake water limited visibility to just a few feet in every direction, creating a disorienting, somewhat claustrophobic sensation despite her considerable pool training beforehand. The water temperature felt noticeably colder than the pool too, seeping gradually through her wetsuit as they descended, an unfamiliar physical discomfort compounding her already elevated anxiety. The group gathered at the surface beforehand, running through a final equipment check while gentle waves lapped against their small support boat anchored nearby. Diego reviewed the specific hand signals they would need underwater, since normal conversation remained impossible once they descended beneath the surface. "Just focus on your breathing and stay close to me," Diego reminded her through hand signals before their descent began, communication underwater relying entirely on predetermined gestures rather than actual speech. Laura's heart raced considerably during their initial descent, the increasing pressure and diminishing light triggering renewed anxiety despite her weeks of careful preparation. The murky green water surrounded her entirely, distant shapes barely visible through the gloom, occasional startled fish darting away as the group of divers slowly descended toward the lake floor. However, remembering Diego's repeated guidance about functioning calmly despite discomfort rather than eliminating it entirely, she focused intensely on her breathing pattern, gradually feeling her anxiety settle into something more manageable as the dive progressed, her earlier panic transforming slowly into cautious, focused concentration. Reaching the lake floor successfully, Laura completed several required skills demonstrations, removing and replacing her mask underwater, practicing emergency air-sharing procedures with Diego, and navigating briefly using only a compass, each skill considerably more challenging in the murky, cold lake environment compared to her earlier, more controlled pool practice. Surfacing after this first open water dive, Laura felt an overwhelming mixture of exhaustion and genuine accomplishment. "That was incredibly difficult," Laura admitted to Susan, her fellow classmate, as they climbed back into their support boat. "It really was," Susan agreed, equally exhausted. "But we actually did it. That has to count for something significant." Over her remaining 3 open water certification dives, Laura's confidence developed steadily, each subsequent dive feeling noticeably less overwhelming than the previous one. Her second lake dive still involved noticeable nervousness, though considerably reduced compared to her first attempt, and she found herself able to actually notice small details around her: a curious turtle swimming past in the distance, sunlight filtering weakly through the murky water above. Her third dive brought a genuine breakthrough moment, when Diego signaled for the group to simply pause and hover quietly for several minutes, practicing patience and calm observation rather than actively working through skills. For the first time, Laura found herself genuinely relaxed underwater, her breathing naturally slow and controlled without requiring conscious effort. By her final certification dive, she found herself genuinely enjoying moments of the experience beyond simply surviving it, noticing small fish swimming curiously nearby, appreciating the strange, muffled silence of the underwater world in a way that had felt impossible during her panicked first attempts weeks earlier. Successfully completing her open water certification, Laura felt genuine pride receiving her official diving certification card from Diego, who offered her particularly warm, personal congratulations given her considerably more challenging journey compared to some of her more naturally comfortable classmates. "You worked harder for this than almost anyone I've certified," Diego told her sincerely. "That makes this accomplishment genuinely meaningful, not just another card in your wallet." With her certification secured roughly 2 months before her planned vacation with Michelle, Laura continued practicing regularly at the local dive shop's pool sessions, determined to build additional confidence and comfort before facing the considerably more complex, unpredictable environment of actual ocean diving. She also began researching extensively about the specific reef ecosystem she would soon be visiting, learning to identify common tropical fish species, coral formations, and general marine biology, transforming her earlier anxiety into genuine, growing excitement about what she might actually encounter during her upcoming ocean dives. She purchased a laminated fish identification card specifically designed for divers, studying it during her lunch breaks at work, quizzing herself on different species until she could recognize dozens of common reef fish by their distinctive colors and shapes. Michelle, noticing Laura's growing enthusiasm during their regular phone calls leading up to the trip, found herself genuinely surprised by the transformation. "You sound like you're actually looking forward to this now," Michelle observed. "A few months ago, you sounded like I was asking you to walk into a shark's mouth voluntarily." "I basically was asking myself that, in my own head," Laura admitted, laughing. "But now I'm genuinely excited. I never expected that." The vacation finally arrived, Laura traveling alongside Michelle and several other mutual friends to the small island destination, staying at a resort specifically catering to diving enthusiasts, complete with its own dive shop and daily boat excursions to nearby reef locations. Her first actual ocean dive, scheduled for the second morning of their vacation, brought renewed nervousness despite her considerable preparation. The open ocean felt considerably more vast and unpredictable than either her controlled pool sessions or even her lake certification dives, waves gently rocking their dive boat as their local guide, a cheerful woman named Isabella, reviewed safety procedures specific to this particular reef location. "The visibility here is incredible, usually over 100 feet, Isabella told the group excitedly. "Completely different experience from lake diving, I promise you." Laura adjusted her equipment nervously, watching Michelle and the other more experienced divers in their group prepare with obvious ease, their confident, practiced movements a stark contrast to her own careful, deliberate checking and rechecking of every strap and connection. Sitting on the edge of the boat, ready for their backward entry into the water, Laura felt her heart pounding, though this particular nervousness carried a noticeably different quality than her earlier training anxiety, something closer to genuine anticipation than pure fear. Laura's initial descent into the clear, warm ocean water immediately confirmed Isabella's promise. Unlike her murky, disorienting lake certification dives, the ocean water here felt remarkably clear, sunlight filtering down in beautiful, shifting patterns, revealing an entire underwater landscape considerably more vivid and alive than anything she had previously experienced. Descending slowly alongside Michelle and their guide, Laura found herself genuinely awestruck rather than anxious, surrounded by vibrant coral formations and colors she hadn't fully appreciated from photographs alone, schools of small, brilliantly colored fish moving in coordinated, graceful patterns around them. "This is incredible," Laura tried to say, though underwater communication remained limited to enthusiastic hand gestures and wide, delighted eyes visible through her mask. Throughout their 40-minute dive, Laura experienced moments of genuine wonder that completely eclipsed her earlier anxiety, a large sea turtle gliding peacefully nearby, seemingly unbothered by the group of divers observing it respectfully, an enormous school of silver fish moving in perfectly synchronized patterns that shifted and rippled like living silver curtains, delicate anemones swaying gently with the current, their bright colors seeming almost impossibly vivid. At one point, Isabella gestured excitedly toward a small crevice in the coral, where a shy moray eel peered out cautiously before retreating further into hiding. Michelle squeezed Laura's arm gently, both of them sharing a silent moment of amazement, communicating their shared wonder entirely through wide eyes and enthusiastic gestures since actual words remained impossible underwater. Laura found herself completely losing track of time, so thoroughly absorbed in observing this entirely new world that her earlier training anxiety felt almost impossible to recall. Surfacing after this first ocean dive, Laura felt tears unexpectedly forming, an overwhelming combination of relief, joy, and genuine amazement at what she had just experienced. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Laura told Michelle, both of them still floating near their dive boat, removing their masks and regulators. "I told you that you'd love it," Michelle said, laughing warmly, genuinely delighted watching her friend's obvious transformation. Over the following days of their vacation, Laura completed several additional dives, each one revealing new, spectacular sights: a small, colorful octopus changing colors defensively as it noticed their approach, a reef shark gliding gracefully in the distance, considerably less frightening than Laura had anticipated given her earlier general anxiety about ocean creatures, and countless species of fish she eagerly researched afterward, determined to properly identify everything she had encountered. During their third dive, Isabella led the group through a particularly beautiful section of reef known locally for its unusual coral formations, resembling underwater gardens of impossible colors and shapes. Laura found herself hovering motionless for several minutes near one particularly striking formation, practicing the buoyancy control she had struggled with so intensely during her pool sessions, now finally feeling completely natural and effortless. Their fourth dive included a brief encounter with a group of playful dolphins passing nearby, though too distant and quick for close observation, their distinctive clicking sounds nonetheless audible even underwater, an experience the entire group discussed excitedly once they surfaced, comparing their brief glimpses of the passing pod. "I've been diving for 6 years," Isabella told them afterward, "and dolphins still make my whole week whenever we're lucky enough to see them." By the vacation's final dive, Laura found herself feeling genuinely at ease underwater, her earlier claustrophobic panic from those first pool sessions feeling like a distant, almost unrecognizable memory. She moved through the water with considerably more confidence and grace, her breathing naturally calm and controlled, fully present and attentive to the remarkable underwater world surrounding her rather than anxiously monitoring her own discomfort. On their final evening, sitting together on the beach watching the sunset after their group's final dive, Michelle turned to Laura with genuine curiosity. "Was it everything you hoped it would be?" Michelle asked, handing Laura a cold drink as they settled into their beach chairs, the sky gradually shifting through brilliant shades of orange and pink above the calm ocean. Laura considered this question seriously for a moment, watching the waves roll gently onto the sand. "Honestly, it was considerably more than I hoped," she admitted. "I almost quit during my very first pool session. I genuinely thought this wasn't something I was capable of doing. I remember driving home that first evening seriously planning to call the dive shop and cancel the rest of the course." "I had no idea it was that close," Michelle said, genuinely surprised. "You never mentioned wanting to quit." "I was embarrassed," Laura admitted. "It felt like everyone else found it so natural, and I was the only one having a complete panic attack over breathing through a tube." "I'm really glad you didn't quit," Michelle said sincerely, reaching over to squeeze her friend's hand. "Me too," Laura agreed. "I think this might be one of the best decisions I've ever made, even though it started with me being completely terrified." Returning home from her vacation, Laura found herself already researching additional diving opportunities, discovering a local diving club that organized regular trips to various diving destinations throughout the year. She joined enthusiastically, quickly becoming friends with fellow divers who shared her newfound passion, many of whom, she discovered, had experienced similarly challenging beginnings before eventually falling genuinely in love with the sport. The club met monthly for informal gatherings, sharing photos and stories from recent trips, occasionally organizing group excursions to nearby lakes and quarries for local diving practice between larger vacation trips. Laura found genuine camaraderie within this community, appreciating conversations with people who understood exactly the particular blend of anxiety and exhilaration that characterized learning to dive as an adult beginner. She also reached out to Diego, her original instructor, sharing photos and stories from her successful vacation dives, genuinely grateful for his patient guidance throughout her considerably challenging certification process. "I knew you had it in you," Diego replied warmly. "Some of my most passionate, dedicated divers started exactly where you did, genuinely terrified during that very first pool session." Over the following year, Laura continued developing her diving skills, eventually pursuing advanced certification courses covering deeper dives, underwater navigation, and even underwater photography, capturing her own images of the remarkable marine life she encountered during subsequent diving trips. Her apartment walls slowly filled with framed photographs from various dives, colorful reminders of a passion she never anticipated developing when she first hesitated over Michelle's original invitation. She occasionally volunteered assisting Diego's beginner courses, specifically requesting to work with the most visibly anxious students, remembering vividly her own considerable struggle and genuinely wanting to offer the same patient reassurance that had helped her through her own difficult beginning. She found particular satisfaction working with a nervous accountant named Ben, who reminded her intensely of her own panicked first pool session, his hands shaking as he attempted his first underwater breath. "I promise this feeling doesn't last forever," Laura told him, sitting beside him at the pool's edge after he surfaced abruptly, gasping just as she once had. "I sat exactly where you're sitting now, completely convinced I couldn't do this." Ben looked at her skeptically. "You seem so comfortable now, though." "I wasn't always," Laura said firmly. "Give yourself the same patience Diego gave me. It genuinely does get easier." Watching Ben successfully complete his own certification several weeks later, embracing his own moment of underwater wonder during his final pool session, gave Laura a surprising, deeply satisfying sense of having come full circle in her own diving journey. "Everyone told me it gets easier," Laura often told nervous beginners, echoing Diego's own words from her earliest sessions. "I honestly didn't fully believe them until it actually happened. Trust the process, even when it feels genuinely uncomfortable." Reflecting occasionally on her remarkable journey, Laura often thought back to that initial hesitant conversation with Michelle, nearly declining the entire diving invitation altogether in favor of simply sitting safely on the boat while everyone else explored the underwater world without her. She thought, too, about that panicked first pool session, her hands trembling as she surfaced, genuinely convinced she had made a mistake signing up at all. She felt genuinely grateful she had ultimately decided to challenge her deep-seated discomfort, discovering not just a genuinely fulfilling new passion, but a renewed confidence in her own capacity to overcome significant fear through patient, consistent effort. She often found herself applying the same lesson beyond diving specifically, approaching other unfamiliar challenges in her life, whether at work or in her personal relationships, with considerably more patience toward her own initial discomfort, remembering that the anxious first attempt at anything genuinely worthwhile rarely predicted eventual mastery or enjoyment. And that's the end of today's story, Beneath the Surface. I really love this story because it shows something meaningful. Sometimes our most significant personal growth happens specifically in the areas that initially frighten us most, if we're willing to approach that fear patiently rather than avoiding it entirely. Before you go, think about this. Is there something that has always intimidated you, that you've perhaps avoided simply because the initial discomfort felt too overwhelming? What might patient, gradual exposure look like for you? Thank you so much for listening today. This has been Anna, and this is the podcast. See you in the next episode. Take care, and keep practicing your English.